Okay.
Okay, this needs to be. Okay, awesome. So here we have our Democracy in a Box weekly meeting that we're going to use to experiment with a form of civil conversation where we take the Rotary 478 framework, the 4-way test, and the 7 areas of focus and the 8 pillars of positive peace. And we will talk through a subject using that framework. And we'll just see how it goes. We're here to explore how it goes. So the topic that Don let me choose is universal basic income. And I guess, so theoretically, yeah, there would be someone who would kind of know a little bit more about the subject, who could maybe talk about the basics of the subject. And so I talked with Don the other day. I think as a starting place, we can use the policy as proposed by Andrew Yang in his 2020 presidential campaign. And so that policy is $1,000 a month for each US adult 18 and over. And it would be paid for. There were several funding mechanisms, but one of the main ones was a 10% VAT tax, 10% value added tax. And we can get into, some of the nuances of that if, Don, if you have any questions about it. There's obviously a lot that I can talk about when it comes to, overall what universal basic income is and what it looks like and everything. But I wonder what, Don, for the experiment, what do you think is most helpful? Is it more helpful to have somebody go in depth at the beginning, or do you think it's almost better to have just, a basic understanding of what it is, and then people can start talking and ask questions, or even start, discovering, because not everyone is going to know everything about the topic, even if somebody goes into it at the beginning. So is there, I don't know, do you think it's more valuable to have more info up front, or more valuable to kind of get into the process?
That's a great question. I think, Zachary, that probably the best thing would be, a short introduction on the basics, and then, as we go through, I think if we do the 4-way test initially, then, those, because that is four questions, that will can kind of drive the questions. We have to have some basic general understanding among the group, so that we don't get bogged down in answering questions about how the basics work. And I've been thinking about this as we move forward. Very possibly what we could do is depending on the topic, we could send out, a 1-pager or something that on that topic, so that everyone could read, to save a little time, so that when we dive into it, when we actually start discussing it, everyone has the base knowledge of just the the terminology and the concept. And then we can spend our time discussing the pros and cons, or how it applies to the principles of Rotary.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Sending out a one page, or yeah, I know you kind of talked about maybe, here's a for and against article or something. And but yeah, I think, yeah, this could be really valuable, especially for you know, uh when, like, during an election or something, and we could just send out uh, a candidate's policy page or something and be like, okay, here's at least what is being said about it by the candidate, and um, what do we think, and where do we go from here?
Yeah, I
Um,
agree. And I was just thinking, what in preparing for today, I just did the basics that I always do, pull up the Wikipedia page.
mhm,
Um, and as luck would have it, Andrew Yang has a new book out,
mhm.
and there were a couple of things that popped up in my news feed, excerpts from the forward of his book that don't talk specifically about UBI, but all kind of feed into that same idea of um, looking at how we treat um, each other, and how we use government to everyone's benefit. And so maybe some combination of links to articles or whatever, so that when we send out the notice of what the topic is going to be, just go ahead and include, you know, 2 or 3 links, or a one pager, so everyone could go as deep as they wanted to prior to.
Yeah, I think that sounds great, and it sounds like you've done some research, and obviously I've done, some research on it. So we probably have enough of an understanding to um, just dive into the process at this point, our
Okay.
Rotary process. Unless, do you have any other questions about? Um, do you have any other questions about it that you feel would be good to
No,
explore before we
no,
get into that?
we have enough. We can dive into it and start asking the Rotary questions.
Cool. So here's starting out with our first Rotary question, the first Rotary question of the four-way test. Four-way test of the things we think, say, and do. And number one is it the truth? And we were already having some conversation the other day about, this being a question where it might actually, as helpful of a question as it is, there may be cases where it's actually more helpful to skip this question and go to the second question, is it fair to all concerned? And but even at this juncture, this is a good exercise. Does this question apply? Is this question worth exploring when it comes to, universal basic income?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think a lot of times, yeah, there are definitely questions where that question can be answered. And I think if we're just talking about a concept, then we have to skip over the truth portion of it,
Mm,
unless, obviously, if we have more people in the conversation, and let's say there are plenty of subjects where there's debate as to whether something is true or not.
yes.
And but I really like that article in the Rotarian magazine from a few years back about the four-way test, using the four-way test in the post-truth era. And that was what the author of that article came out and said, that that a lot of problems and questions, you can't answer that first question. It's, and so it's not that it's not knowable. It's just that by jumping to number 2 and 3, it might be a better way of framing the question and framing the problem to get to the solution. So I'd be fine with jumping to 2 if you would.
That sounds good. And I wondered even, if this is a good process for this to kind of explore each question, and then when everyone in the conversation is satisfied with that, then we move on, so it may stay a long time on, question number 2 or something. Is it fair to all concerned? But when everyone feels, okay, we've come to a place where it is fair to all concerned, or maybe it's not, everyone has a consensus on that, and the conversation can move forward.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So question number 2, is it fair to all concerned? And this is an interesting one to approach when we're talking, because obviously, one thing we could ask, is it fair to all concerned with the participants in the conversation? But I imagine we also want to try thinking about everyone concerned in the topic or in the situation, and try to think about it, even if I'm biased and I'm not able to, totally get there, I should at least be exploring, is it fair to the people concerned who are not me? Yeah.
I was just thinking about this while you were talking, and I said, I think it might be instructive to identify who are all concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the recipients would be concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Society as a whole, that is, and this is a rabbit hole we could go down if we're not careful. That is it paid for, is the societal question of, is this fair to everyone in the society that is decided that this is something we should do.
Mm-hmm.
I guess there could be an argument that it's not fair to the recipients, because there's this idea that possibly these people who we don't know, but we're theorizing that would get this money, would somehow waste it, or use it for purposes other than what it was intended.
Mm-hmm.
In the little bit that I know about it, I would argue against that, but I could see where that would be a possible argument by some that it's not fair to those who receive it.
Yes, that is an argument that I have seen made. I have yet to see that argument made by anyone who would be receiving it. I have yet to see the argument made that it would be unfair to me to receive $1,000 a month.
Okay, yeah, the dreaded me versus we question.
Yeah.
I would never do that, but I'm not so sure about someone who isn't me.
Hmm. Um, the so yeah, there's that part of it. One thing that's key to the was key to Andrew Yang's plan that was a concern, is that the recipients, it would be an opt-in program, and so they could opt into it, and they would, by opting in, they would forego certain welfare benefits. It would stack with certain benefits, but it would, I believe one that I remember was food stamps. They wouldn't qualify for those if they had opted in to receive a universal basic income. And part of the reasoning behind that was that by cutting some of these other, social support programs, that would be another way that the universal basic income program would be paid. And I think the other idea behind it was to get people in a position where they're receiving support, they're receiving a floor, and at the same time, sort of, and this is, I think, where it gets what is fair, but freeing them from benefits that, freeing them from benefits where they would have to choose, what do they kind of talk about it as, like the cliff, where if now they're making too much money, they lose these benefits, and so there's a gap there, and it's all sometimes maybe easier to, or I don't really know because I'm not in this situation, but sometimes they would choose to not make more money so that they can, because there would be a gap in their benefits at that point.
The cliff event of losing healthcare or child, some social program.
Yes.
This would introduce personal choice to that matter, where they could opt in or not.
Yes. Yeah. And so that's certainly a conversation of, is it fair to, is it fair to everyone concerned? Is it fair to the recipients, who, and I personally, I don't totally know the answer. I know there was some people had different feelings, but I know that at least some people preferred the idea of $1,000 a month, no strings attached, cash that they could use flexibly, rather than some of the other benefits that they were getting.
Yeah, I think, I know my thoughts on this have evolved a lot because of the idea that, one of the things that government does pretty well is give people money. And the fewer restrictions you put on it, if we are truly a society based on personal choice and individual freedom, and we acknowledge that there is a cost to society for every single social program, and if we acknowledge that there's always going to be ups and downs in society, in job opportunities, in if you get dealt a bad hand financially, that the simplest, and one could argue the fairest way to even out those bumps for the vast majority of Americans would be to offer a flat dollar per month with no strings attached. Now, could you make it work by offsetting, other programs? That opens up a whole discussion. But if you were just looking at the cost of $1,000 a month, that's $12,000 per year per person. If you look at it as an investment in helping someone break the cycle of being dependent on social programs, or you use it as the potential for someone to break the cycle and leave a job and maybe go back to school to get in, to have a position to get a better job that would pay more, in which then they would pay more taxes, or it would allow someone to maybe go to the doctor and take care of a medical issue before it became a major issue, where they would be they would have to go to the emergency room, and they would be faced with thousands of dollars that would bankrupt them. And then as society, we would all end up paying more for that. And so if you look at it just as the, you can always find, I think you can always find the example, that one exception where someone's going to abuse the system. But if you're talking about, I don't know, there's 330 million Americans. I don't know how many 18 and over. It's got to be 250, maybe. I don't know. Let's say it's 200. That's a lot of people that would benefit from that. And so I guess my vote would be that if you could really do the calculations on the, not just the benefit of just those dollars back into the economy, but also the benefit of, and I'm jumping to benefit, and we're already talking about fairness.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
But if you looked at it that way, then it does, at least in my mind, it does seem like that would be fair to all concerned.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I certainly agree. For me, it's very hard to, and I'm biased in this way, but just, but also, yeah, for me, it's very hard to spot widespread problems with something like universal basic income, and partially because I think it's just something we haven't experimented with anything like it on the scale on the scale that we're talking about today. But if we start to think about not only the costs, the things that we're saving on as a society, but if we also start to think about the ways that we are, maybe this goes outside the bounds of this conversation, but the ways that we're unlocking human potential, it just seems like the benefits are, and therefore the fairness, the benefits are enormous. So, but what you said about jumping to benefits over fairness, that actually, like, that brings up a question for me of what is the difference between those questions? Because question number 4 is, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Is it why do you feel that is it fair to all concerned is a question that needs to come before is it beneficial to all concerned? Because in my mind, I almost think, well, if it's beneficial to all concerned, it's fair to all concerned, but I might be missing a nuance and language or meaning.
Yeah, that's a great question. I've thought about that a lot. And I've noticed that when I've talked to people who've never heard of the 4-way test, and they sometimes will reduce it to 3 and combine fair and beneficial, because in a way you could say you could make the 4-way test the 3-way test, because the third question is does it build goodwill and better friendships? So you're combining 2 concepts there. But I think it's more of, in my mind, it's more of, obviously every question doesn't lend itself to clean answers on the 4-way test. I think sometimes it's, if you're not sure or it's not clear about one of the questions, then maybe the 4th question, will it be beneficial to all concerned, might bring some clarity. I think for the most part, I think beneficial and fair are tied together. But there, I can see where there might be some questions in theory that maybe you don't know whether this is fair or not, in which case you would, because fairness and beneficiality, they're pretty close. But I think when you're talking about individual, maybe when you're talking about individual rights and individual freedom, that's where I think a lot more people would apply the term fair. And beneficial is more of when you're talking about societal, the we as a whole, is this beneficial to everyone? I don't know. That's kind of the way I see it. And I think in this case, you could say, is it fair, as in, is it fair to the individuals who, 2 separate groups, the individuals who would receive the benefits, and if I can see where there are some who would say, well, why should I pay for fill in the blank? That's not fair to me. I'm working hard and these other people are not. I know you've done a lot more research on, pilot programs where they've done this on a smaller scale. And it's been really interesting. I think some of the things you shared with me that in fact, I guess we've already broached the subject. I think let's combine fair and beneficial. Where some of these pilot programs, where cities have done this with private funding to test it, I think they were surprised. They were really surprised at the fairness and the benefits.
Yes. Yeah, there are. It's pretty consistent that people use the money in ways that helps them and improves their lives. Like they're able to see, like the recipients are usually, I mean, they're able to make improvements in their lives, and you know, there are stories like there was a program I was telling you about, Don, where they were giving $500 a month to home free people or people without a home, and those people were I forget how many, but I know there was at least, you know, they talked about one guy who was able to secure housing, and then he even, you know, he even found a job and everything, and was able to but was really only able to find the job through being able to secure housing, which came from, you know, having a little bit of money to work with. And I think one thing I read in a kind of somebody's testimonial, you know, on in the Stockton program was, you know, poor people know how to budget. And so they're very good at using that money to benefit them. I don't think it in what we've seen, I think that's the biggest myth that gets dispelled is, does the money go to waste, or does it get used for I guess, you know, drugs and alcohol, and overall it is being used well. So yeah, does that speak to your question? I feel like I got off track a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think it does, and it kind of takes it kind of leads into the third question. You know, will it build goodwill and better friendship? Some of the pilot programs that one in particular that you're talking about, I was really you know, I think it feeds into so much of the conversations that we're currently having about personal choice and personal freedom. And it seems like that when you talk to people who are against this, you know, any type of government program, a lot of the biggest concern is waste, fraud, and abuse, or bureaucratic inefficiencies. And what I kind of like about the concept of this is that this almost does away with the bureaucratic inefficiencies. And so if you're comparing this to another type of program that is means tested, or that requires employing additional government employees to monitor it and to enforce it, and you know, it's kind of counterintuitive. You almost have to step back and say, okay, I want to look at how government works a little differently, you know. And it reminds me of the old, you know, the free school lunch program, where there was out in Western Kansas, there was a rural district that for various reasons had over half of the children at this school were eligible for the school lunch program. Well, the way that the federal funding and the state funding worked on that, they had to have someone administer the free lunches, but over half of the children were eligible for free lunches, and they only had, in this small tiny little school, they had I'm showing my age, they had two lunch ladies that were preparing the food, but they got money for a third one, But the way the bureaucracy was that she had to spend most of her time doing administration. And they kind of looked at this and said, this is crazy. And they decided to, for the money that they would save, they just gave everybody free lunches. And the third lunch lady helped make lunches. And so they were able to save money because they instead of having to go outside and buy food that was already prepared, they were able to bring it in, and they actually had better meals, and they fed everybody. And because they saw, like you said, that they saw the inefficiencies in the system, and they were able to fix it. So I think that
Amazing.
that so often we try to govern so much, and we don't give our fellow citizens any benefit of the doubt. And we're governing for that tiny little sliver of waste, fraud, and abuse, instead of stepping back and saying, why are we spending our dollars? Well, we want to help our fellow citizens. We want to build goodwill and better friendship.
Mm-hmm.
And just from a pure economic efficiency, it seems, I feel like this would be something would be worth a try.
Absolutely. I love that example of the lunch program. And there's something, and maybe this is a little, no, I think this is, it's important to the subject, because I think this kind of is overlooked a lot. One of the benefits that I see with UBI, especially, as we're talking about $1,000 a month, no strings attached. Yeah, the benefit of it is so much more than $1,000 1 month. It is, the benefit that I see of it is that it's a stream, and that, and I think Andrew Yang kind of used this example, but I'm very passionate about this part of it. Is like, well, okay, so the first month that someone gets $1,000, that's exciting. That's never happened before. Maybe they make a decision that other people would judge. Maybe they go out and they buy a big TV. Well, next month, when they get $1,000 again, they're probably not going to go out and buy another big TV. Or, if they, because what we're giving people an opportunity with here is, over time, they have resources to work with which they can make better decisions, with which they can make better decisions, and also just I don't think we have fully grasped the profound effect that always knowing that more money is coming in is going to have to the country, or to all of these individuals. I think we've never, I don't think we've ever had a point where people would have that much security, that much of a sense of security to build on. And I kind of think about it as like running water. Like we all have, or many of us have running water now, and the benefits of that are tremendous. We are able to do so much with that water, and we also, our minds are freed up from the task of water collection. And how do we, it's not, each one of us is not trying to figure out, how do I go and get water piped into my house? That's just taken care of. And
Yeah.
so what if we were to do that with money, with cash? What if, you know, because right now we're in a society where I think truly we are all operating on, okay, how do I go out and get the water I need to survive? So how many rain buckets do I have to put out? How much do I have to you know, ration this? How so I think that shift in people will be a profound one, but that's kind of going off on my perspective of it.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I like the idea that because I think that feeds into a big societal problem that we rarely address. That's not really exactly this, but it's definitely tied into it. And it's some number like over 30% of the population is unbanked. And the cost to the individual, but also the cost to society of those people not having a way to receive money and to disperse that money. And that could be a component of UBI, is that along with this money, the most efficient way to deliver it would be some sort of account that would be tied to a debit card or something, so that people who have it, it would just go into their account. But people who didn't could get assistance in setting up an account, because that seems to be a real vicious cycle. If you're unbanked or underbanked, that you spend, it's the 21st century equivalent of water buckets. If you're spending a lot of your free time going and cashing your check and then going and paying your bills, that's not productive for you or society. That's a strain on you personally, that's a strain on your family, and it's a strain on society. Sadly, there are industries that profit from that. Not to say that I think these industries would still do fine, but I know that was a discussion that going back to the history of this country. At one time, the post office provided many of those services. That's a thing of the past, and no one does that anymore. But I think we were talking a little bit about, when it comes to SNAP benefits, there's money, but there's strings attached. But it also became much more efficient. They saved a lot of money when they started issuing a card that looked more like a regular debit card. Anyway, so I guess probably we should talk more. Do we feel like we've covered the four-way test? Should we dive into the 7 areas of focus?
Yes, yeah, we can do that. I just to put a footnote on it there. I do know, in talking with my dad, who has a small business, he was intimidated by the idea of the VAT the 10% value added tax. I think not just because of the not just because of the money, but also because of maybe the burden, whatever burden that might put on his business in terms of accounting for it, tracking it, whatever rules would come in place. And so he brought that up, and that, and you may have a perspective on that too, but that is one thing that I've heard where I've thought, I wonder how, I personally, of course, assumed that the benefits would outweigh that, but it's something where he clearly felt like that would not be, that part would not really be fair or beneficial or something.
Yeah, I could see that. I think anytime, obviously you have that's a just imposing a new form of tax. I know VAT has been talked about forever. And even though it's used all over the world, it's still a foreign concept to most Americans. And you're going to get, I think you're going to get pushback from people that would say that any type of federally imposed sales tax, which is how it would be presented, is going to be a hard sell. I think that's why I like the idea of possibly combining it with, where could there be savings in other social programs?
Mm-hmm.
There was a quote when I think in apparently this concept's been around for quite some time. And there was a quote talking about the benefits of not just the cost of funding the cash, but what societal benefits you would get from this. How much crime is perpetrated by people who are hungry or poor? It's not all just serial criminals. Often it's an action of necessity, not temperament. But I think back to the VAT, I think that's definitely something that would have to be addressed as to there would be some burden on businesses to collect that. But if every single American was getting $1,000, that would also apply to every shop owner and every business owner. They're getting that $1,000 too. It's a lot like Social Security. If everyone pays into it and everyone takes out, there's a sense, a better sense of fairness. And I think you would have to address, if you were going to try to impose that, you would definitely have to address the VAT portion of it. And you'd have to get business leaders on board to see the benefits, the fairness, and the that's a little bit more of that's a little bit more abstract than just you know, we're going to put this money into the economy, and there's no question that's been shown that money that you give to people lower down on the economic ladder goes back into the economy faster. You know, people who don't have any money don't save their money.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And but if you expect people to break the cycle, like you said, that first month they might buy a TV, or the first month they might, you know, spending on something extravagant, and the people who are against it would use that as but it's unlikely that they're going to buy a second TV the next month. And I think most people, the vast majority of people, given knowing that they have that steady stream, are going to be responsible and will pay off their bills, or they'll pay down their student debt, or they'll pay off their outstanding traffic tickets, so that a bench warrant isn't issued because they didn't pay their traffic tickets, or their library fines, or whatever. Was it the article that you sent me about the $500 a month experiment that someone said that they really wanted to eat healthier, but they couldn't, and that $500 a month was the difference between them being able to buy healthier food, which led to, you know, in the long run, better health.
That's amazing. I've definitely seen that. I've definitely seen people report that from receiving some kind of guaranteed income. I can't remember if it's in the article that I sent about the $500 a month or not, but that is definitely a result that I have seen people talk about. Yeah. And so yes, so that could be, so that may be a topic where other people may still feel, well, this isn't quite fair yet. They may, so yeah, for the sake of kind of exploring, or I mean, with the VAT, it will require buy-in from business leaders and business owners. But for the sake of this conversation, and you talked about moving on to the 7 areas of focus. Does that feel good to you?
Yeah, it does. I think our time constraint requires that we move on. So
okay, very good. And so, and here, you know, what I read about Rotary is that it only, you know, they only need a project. When they're talking about a project, they're only looking for it to feed into or support one of those 7 areas of focus. So it doesn't have to address all of them. And so what would be a good way to approach this this segment?
Well, I think maybe because a lot of people who are going to maybe participate in this aren't super familiar with the 7 areas of focus. I think all Rotarians are pretty familiar with the 4-way test. The 7 areas of focus is a little deeper dive. Maybe we should just go through those real quickly.
Yeah. So the 7 areas of focus: saving mothers and children, supporting education, growing local economies, fighting disease, supporting environment, providing clean water, sanitation and hygiene, and promoting peace.
Okay, so which of these, if any, would universal basic income help promote?
I personally feel like it supports all of these. Actually, I feel like it supports all of these in a really strong, or promotes all of these in a really strong way. But obviously, yeah, saving mothers and children, it $1,000 a month for a mother with her kids, or maybe a single mother, that changes. I mean, that changes a lot. That's a lot to work with. That's a lot. Or maybe it's not a lot to work with, but it's something to work with. I think that, in my experience, something like that could only be positive. So yeah, I'm not sure if maybe all topics are not as broad as this, but I certainly see UBI supporting all of these. And the biggest, I think one of the biggest reasons is something we've talked about, where UBI helps, or should help, civic engagement. And it should, if UBI doesn't directly support something or help something, my feeling is that it almost always indirectly supports something, because universal basic income supports individuals, which then allows those individuals to put their energy, creativity, attention towards important areas. So promoting peace, supporting the environment. I think universal basic income we would have more people volunteering, and really we would have more people doing things that they feel are important, whether they can make money doing those things or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see when it comes to, saving mothers and children. I know a big debate currently is the struggle that many families have with the need for both parents to work, which then requires both parents, or it requires the need for childcare. And it seems like if all of a sudden you're injecting $2,000 per month into a household, that then that family would be better off making a decision about, do they spend that money on childcare, or do they adjust how, who works and who stays home? Would that be the breakover point? Because a lot of, I think it's pretty universal that parents are the best childcare. And if you those of us who remember the good old days, where the single family, or the single income earner was the norm, would this help some people get back to that? It might not, but would it give families the freedom to either pay for childcare, or allow some flexibility with the two parents as to how many hours they had to work.
Mm-hmm. And I believe the argument can be made that, parents are the best child care, and parents are even better child care when they are when they are experiencing less financial stress.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so even in situations where parents are already providing childcare, I can only see this enhancing that experience for everyone.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we've kind of touched on some of these already. I mean, as far as fighting disease, if you have money, you're not having to decide, you're not having to make a choice between, eating and going to the doctor. I think you're right. I think all of these apply. We could do a whole topic on promoting peace, because this area of focus used to be referred to as peace and conflict resolution. And I agree. Is there any other area of focus that you want to talk about? Or
no, I feel satisfied there.
Okay.
I feel if somebody felt otherwise, we could go into that, but I feel good.
Well, it's lucky we agree on everything. So
yes, yeah.
Maybe we could use this just briefly. We're going over our hour here, but maybe we could briefly just use the peace segue to briefly talk about how this applies to the 8 pillars of positive peace.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so to go over those, we have the 8 pillars of positive peace: well-functioning government, equitable distribution of resources, free flow of information, good relations with neighbors, high levels of human capital, acceptance of the rights of others, low levels of corruption, and sound business environment. And so with Rotary, they kind of, when they're evaluating a project, do they want to make sure that it touches on or supports all of these 8 pillars? Or
this is something that Rotary International has partnered up with the Institute of Economics and Peace, and this is a partnership that's been going on for a while. It's not well known in Rotary, but I think it's a good framework for helping clubs and decide where they spend their energy, because it's been identified that if you reframe the idea of peace as not just the absence of violence or conflict, but there are positive actions that individuals and groups and societies can take to promote peace. And those 8 pillars are what you just stated. And that it's not all government's responsibility. Well-functioning government is important, because if government doesn't function properly, then for example, in this country, if the laws aren't being enforced and people don't feel like the government is acting on their behalf, then you slide toward, away from a peaceful society. I think in the example of this particular action, essentially what we're talking about is redistributing resources. And so I think this kind of ties in, equitable distribution of resources ties in with the 4-way test. There's no question that you're taking money from, from society, from the we, and giving it to individuals. I think, you can argue about details, but for the most part, wealth inequality definitely leads to societal problems. Does UBI solve that? I think it's the mechanics of it definitely moves toward it. If someone has no money and you give them some money, at least temporarily, you've started the process of breaking that cycle. I think, a lot of these are cousins of each other. Good relationships with neighbors is, a cousin of good, will it build goodwill and better friendships? I think that I'm always the problem of people being unhoused is an issue that's been it's been a nagging issue in this country for a long time, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better. And whereas we don't have enough time to solve every bit of it today, but the examples that we've given of being able to, are there people who are currently living on the street or in a shelter that UBI would help them break the cycle, which would definitely lead to good relationships with their neighbors. It's kind of hard to be a good neighbor when when people, you're relying on, they're just the unfairness of not living under a roof and having to, people who are homeless are more susceptible to disease, crime, all of the bad things that society has to offer. But I'll throw it to you. What do you?
Oh, no, I agree completely. I think for me, and this is just for me, I feel like we could easily find a reason or a way that universal basic income supports each of these pillars, or is in alignment with each of these pillars. Even something out there like acceptance of the rights of others, that is, I don't know if there have been studies on this, but I think there's a pretty direct connection between kind of a lack mentality and a difficulty to accept the rights of others. And so if we can ease the lack mentality, if we can increase the abundance mentality, acceptance of the rights of others becomes easier, I think, in many cases, because there's less fear, and I don't even know all the things that are connected here, but I think there's a lot wound up in that lack. So I feel, and obviously I would need to find some sources on that, but I think even with a pillar like that, we can find ways that UBI supports it, and like we talked about with civic engagement, well-functioning government, a democracy where everyone is voting. I think UBI probably, again, I don't think there are experiments with this, or there haven't been yet, but I think there's a really good chance that people become more civically engaged. It's easier to vote, easier to also inform yourself when you are when you don't have literally survival on your mind all the time. This changes. It's a paradigm shift, I think, for a lot of people, going from I don't know how I'm going to survive to, oh, there is a level at which I will always survive. I can always survive because it's here. There's this floor. So yeah, I think it's fascinating all the ways that can support people, and therefore support institutions.
Yeah,
so
I agree, and
yeah.
I think we feeding onto that. I was just thinking about the high levels of human capital,
Yeah.
which is kind of what you're saying as well. If the purpose of a healthy democracy is to allow every individual to attain their highest potential,
Mm-hmm.
everything that is talked about in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, and and somewhat the Gettysburg Address, you have a government of, by, and for the people if a big percentage of the people are struggling to survive. And does this allow, is this the rising tide that would lift all the ships? And is it, in some ways, does it even help in an odd way, reducing levels of corruption? Because if it was well managed, then there's less bureaucracy and there's less potential for fraud. If you're just giving someone cash to buy food or go to the doctor, then there's less potential for Medicaid fraud or food stamp fraud, or any myriad of ways that people feel compelled to abuse the system.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I had never even thought about that until we started talking about it. But
yeah, it's great to it's a great framework. This is a great framework to look at these all of these things that are important to Rotary, and arguably important to the world, and run an idea by them and through them. Yeah, and I know we probably want to wrap up here soon. Do you have any thoughts on what we should we wrap up soon? Should we?
I think we should. I think we're getting on to an hour and a half here.
Oh, there we go.
I think let's wrap this up, and then as we talked about, we'll continue this this framework of conversation with another topic. But I would really like to let's investigate even in, because Rotarians are people of action. I would love to address this with a larger group down the road, maybe with the idea of what actions would we want to take within our within this group, that either advocate for or to continue the discussion and maybe fine tune some recommendations. I know there's a lot more pilot programs going on. I know that just within, and I think the discussion could be continued, because the idea of universal basic income, we're talking about a very, very finite approach. I know there are some modifications. We talked a little bit about in Fareed Zakaria's book about post-pandemic society. He addresses some hybrid of UBI and the earned income tax credit, where there would be a leveling up rather than just a straight check or a flat amount. There would be a leveling up where if someone was in an industry that did not pay as well, would bring, so rather than putting the burden on employers to raise income, at least for a time. I don't know, that's something we can get into.
I'm fascinated by it, though. I think that's
down
great.
the road, or even the fact that there's that minor modification that they've made to the child tax credit. They upped the amount just slightly, but the big thing was they changed it to a monthly payout, which most people, if you give them a check once a year, that's a lot different than giving them the exact same amount divided by 12 once a month. And I have lots of stories about that. We may have to do a chapter 2 on UBI. All right. So unless you have something else for now, I'm going to end the recording. And
yeah, that sounds great. Thank you for talking about this, Don. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.